guys. So I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys a little bit about Black generational wealth, and this video is going to serve as an educational and informative video. And what I wanted to do with this video is I wanted to look at several different key areas that I feel like impact Black generational wealth the most. But I want to start off first with the Black-owned businesses. Then followed by that, we're going to talk a little bit about Black Wall Street to kind of give you guys some insight and a little perspective as far as how Black economics worked in the past. And then what I want to do from that point going forward is I want to talk about Black agriculture and Black farmers, because that also happens to be another issue as well. And then finally, I'm going to conclude it with Black home ownership. And you'll see that as I go through these different stages, how one connects to another. So that's why I'm going in this order. But I do want to actually say a little bit before I do begin. I want to give you guys a little bit of my own personal commentary. I think that when it comes to Black generational wealth, and when we look at how other communities effectively are able to practice things like group economics, when you look at our race versus other races of people, you see that other races of people are able to have this sort of unity amongst each other where, for example, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it seems like that particularly whenever we look at the Asian community, you see how Asians normally have a monopoly on the beauty supply stores. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've gone to numerous beauty supply stores and you've noticed Asians are particularly the ones that have the they have the proprietor of the establishment title to their business. Basically, they own their own business. And you see sometimes with the Arabs, how Arabs will also have a high monopoly on businesses like gas stations. Sometimes you may see them in urban clothing stores, you know, basically places where Black people will frequent the most. And it's because they understand how it is that Black people shop. They understand that we don't really necessarily have the knowledge to be able to practice effective group economics, where we basically buy exclusively within our own. And one thing I want to say before anybody does comment below in the comment section, I am completely aware of the fact that because Black people don't have enough power or resources, that of course we don't have a monopoly on the industry overall. So I do know that eventually you're going to go to a business and solicit them for services or products. But my thing is, if we can try to keep as much money and wealth within our community as possible, I really do think that that would kind of help just a little bit as far as making sure that the Black generational wealth is not completely depleted by the year 2050, because that to me is very unnerving. I would not want us to have no type of wealth that we can pass down to our children or any kind of resources. So I'm making this video so that hopefully we can curb that. You know, I do have some alternatives for you guys, so definitely make sure to stay tuned for the remainder of this video. Okay, so you guys got a little bit of my commentary on Black-owned businesses already, but I really want to touch on the research and statistics. So you have a number in mind for the deficit in this area. I want to read the information and results of this survey by Black Enterprise. And it actually says here where it says that the survey had 2,600 business owner participants, with 57% being African American. And this group stated that though their businesses were successful and lucrative, the industry still presented difficulties in terms of being a Black-owned business. And this cluster of Black business owners also were not as poised and positive when it came to the partisan system in the division of smaller businesses. So just to kind of read a little bit more stats here, 62% of Black American business owners were men, while 38% were women. And the age range went from 40 to 49, and the percentages read 28% for this age range or this category. And for the age range of 50 to 59, this part read 25%. So the last group's age ranges between 30 to 39, and this reads at 22% of Black Americans who were business owners. Something interesting to note, most Black business owners and entrepreneurs, according to this article, actually reside in states like Georgia, Texas, California, Florida, and even North Carolina. So a majority of them look like they reside in the South, but there is also some too that are prevalent in California as well too. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, also, what I was reading was the Black business participants stated that their reasoning for starting their own business was because they had a yearning to pursue their fervidness. And in the same survey, it had stated that 53% actually they stated that they wanted to be their own business owner and they were actually eager to begin, while 30% took in the initiative and started a business the moment the chance came to them, with 22% stating their dissatisfaction with working in commercial America. And also, I don't know if you guys can see this here. Sorry, the screen is kind of not cooperating, so I'll just have to try to read this to you the best I can. But it says here that 12% of Black business owners stated that they began their own business after a layoff or some form of like a contractual agreement. So, of course, with owning a Black business, this presents a set of unique and difficult challenges. The most prominent one with 80% stating that capital or money was the problem. And that's a common trend. I know you guys probably are already familiar with this, but that's literally the reason why Black businesses suffer so much, is literally because of the money. It's nothing else. Obviously, we know that we have a certain degree of creativity to anything that we put our heart into. So it's not about any kind of like business ideas. It's literally just because we don't have the right funds to fund the business. So it says that a low 0.2% principal was apportioned toward the beginning phases of businesses by Black women in 2016. And in the meantime, only 34 Black women who own businesses were allocated over $1 million of financial support for the previous year. And I know this may sound like a lot to you guys, but it is significantly low in comparison to other communities. So what this means is that a lot of Black business owners must use their own money for their businesses without the aid of any kind of like a subsidy or a grant or some kind of like a loan. And the research further shows that 70% of Black-owned businesses are typically funded with cash, and 23% get loans from friends and family or other sources. And the last statistic revealed that 11% utilized their 401k savings to help create or fund the business. Now think about this, you guys. Imagine having your own business, but every time you try and apply for some type of like financial assistance, you're constantly being turned down or denied, and the only way your business can actually make ends meet is by money from your own personal sources. And see, this is one of the challenges that Black entrepreneurs and business owners face, is not only the money to start their business, but also the money to actually sustain the business as time goes on. And it can be difficult. And I think that it stems from the fact that we don't have a large monopoly, like I was talking about earlier, in key areas for us to be able to benefit from. If there were two major outlets that were Black owned in terms of lending services, we may be able to get somewhere, even if we just started at the basics of small businesses. But because there aren't any, this can create complexities for a lot of us. Now, as I stated, we obviously have the creativity and the wherewithal to sell products or services, but the question always comes back the same: how am I going to fund this? And I plan on giving solutions towards the end, so just make sure you guys just hang tight until the end. But for now, I think that we need to go ahead and take a trip back to the past with Black Wall Street. So let us go all the way back to 1889 with an ambitious Black man by the name of O.W. Gurley, who would later become the creator of Black Wall Street along with some colleagues. Now, I want to kind of give you guys just like a brief story of O.W. Gurley, because a lot of you may not even know who he is or who he was. But at the time in 1889, he went to what we referred to in the past as Indian Territory to partake in the Oklahoma Land Run, which was an event where people had the capability of purchasing land on a first come, first served basis. And O.W. Gurley's previous occupation was sort of like an apprentice to President Grover Cleveland at the time, and he wanted to pursue his own path and purpose. And during the year of 1906, he moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and made the decision to buy 40 acres of land, and it could only be sold to Black people. And Gurley opened his first business on this land, which was a rooming house near railroad tracks, and the street that it was on was named Greenwood Avenue. This area was prevalent amongst the Black immigrants who were fleeing subjugation and repression in Mississippi. They had sought asylum in the building owned by O.W. Gurley, And this was due to the fact that racial maltreatment and tyranny from the southern region did not exist in Greenwood Avenue. So the area that O.W. Gurley had, obviously they didn't have that there, so they could seek refuge there. And Gurley had actually took the initiative to expand on his successful venture by building 3 more buildings and an additional 5 residences. He did this and he purchased an 80-acre farm and simultaneously opened a church for worship. Eventually, another successful black entrepreneur came along by the name of J.B. Stratford when he came to Tulsa in 1889. Now, J.B.'s philosophy was that black people should effectively practice group economics by combining their resources and funds by working together and supporting each other's businesses. And J.B. had purchased more land and invested in real estate in the northern portion of Tulsa. He sold only to black consumers and was able to divide property evenly. And see, this inspired O.W. Gurley even more and other black business owners to do the same thing. Later, J.B. had purchased a hotel and named it after himself called the Stratford Hotel. And it did exceptionally well for black people. They were really able to take advantage of the numerous benefits that the hotel offered and comfortably. And during this time, the hotel was the most renowned hotel for black people in the entire country, basically the entire United States for black people. However, disaster would soon strike, and within a short amount of time, O.W. Gurley would lose everything. When the race riot occurred, the Gurley Hotel, which costed $55,000, was destroyed, along with other black businesses like a parlor, a cafe, barbershop, pool hall, and cigar store were completely devastated. And when he reviewed his account information of everything that he lost, it was around $200,000. Now, I do want to pause for a moment because I took the liberty of breaking down the calculations for these damages. So when we look at Mr. Gurley's hotel, which was worth $55,000 in 1921, when we do the inflation adjustments for the cost of what this would be in 2020, this hotel in 2020 would be worth $785,538.27 today, which is a significant hit. And I also did the inflation expenses for Mr. Gurley's total loss. So when we look at $200,000 today in 2020, this would be a massive $2,856,502.79. Sorry, let me reread that. It would actually be a massive $2,856,502.79. Sorry about that, you guys. And as you can imagine, Mr. Gurley was deeply saddened by this tragedy. I mean, all the hard work that he had done was basically gone within like a matter of seconds. And after this occurred, rumors speculated and started swarming about what happened to Mr. Gurley after the race riot. One rumor stated that because of his leadership abilities and persuasive ways to create stability for black people, it was rumored that a mob had lynched him and his body was placed in an unmarked grave. But then another rumor suggests that Mr. Gurley went to California and faded into abstruseness or obscurity. So now that you guys have a backstory on Black Wall Street, hopefully you kind of understand why it's important to never give up. I understand that it can be difficult to really gain control of the money aspect of it, but look at how these two amazing black entrepreneurs put their all on the line. And they even influenced an entire group of black people to trust their process. And I'll talk more about this towards the end of my commentary, but for now, I want to go ahead and shift gears for a moment. So now what I want to do is I want to focus on a different area of black generational wealth. This subject is going to talk about black agriculture and black farmers. So I had come across an article that was posted by The Guardian. I'll make sure to leave the link in the description so you guys can check that out. But there was a significant decline in the number of black farmers over the past century. Around the year 1920, there were 949,889 black farmers. And on statistical average today, of the 3.4 million farmers, there's only 1.3%, which translates to 45,508 black farmers, which kind of piques the question, what happened to all the black farmers in between that time? Because this is a considerably large decrease in black farmers. And these stats come directly from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The research had actually revealed that 0.52% of the farmland is actually owned by black farmers, which reveals that a whopping 95% of farmers today are white. And the black farmers of today face a common problem. They are paid much less than white farmers are. And the median seems to fall within the range of 40,000 or less annually. And when you guys think about it, this may seem like a lot, but it's actually not much given the constant upkeep that farms require. I mean, you have to think about things like livestock, supplies for crops, and just basic routine quickly. White farmers make considerably higher amounts, 190,000 annually, and this happens because white farmers have more acres of land. With any situation where black people try to establish resources for themselves, it requires funds for any project that they're working towards, and this, of course, came with racialized tension and acts. It would not be uncommon for black farmers to walk out of their homes and discover sabotage to their farm. And let me just kind of give you guys some examples of. This could be anything ranging from setting fire to fields, using poison to ruin crops, tampering with tractors, I mean, you name it. Anything that they could do to sabotage black people and their success with their farms, they would do it. And this actually brings me to an inspirational black man by the name of John Boyd Jr. And John was aware of the racism that occurred when it came to farming and the obstacles black farmers face. Now, John had bought a farm when he was 18 years old for about $51,000 in 1984. And I did my research for the inflation amount on this number as well. Mr. Boyd would have paid $125,490 for this farm today in 2020. And John Boyd Jr. was actually facing racial discrimination because he went to get a loan from the Farmers Home Administration, and his application for a loan was incessantly denied, and this occurred over several years. Mr. Boyd even recalled an instance where a loan officer told him that they were incapable of helping him, despite another person coming in and giving this person a loan for $157,000. And all John Boyd asked for was $5,000. John continued suffering from racial abuse and discrimination to try and get a loan for his farm. The loan officer would sometimes throw his application away in the trash and was threatened by the officer on numerous occasions. And it was only after Boyd filed several disputes against this officer that any action was taken. The USDA Civil Rights Office of Virginia had conducted an investigation, and they found that John had probable cause in a discrimination lawsuit he filed. Now, due to Mr. Boyd's successful triumph in his case against this corrupt organization, it actually provoked other black farmers to come out and tell their stories. And in 1995, John Boyd Jr. actually created the National Black Farmers Association. And it turns out that other black farmers were facing the same exact form of racial discrimination. They too had applications where they were not taken seriously or experienced delays in response time. John, along with another 400 black farmers, decided to sue the USDA in a case called Pigford v. Glickman. And this lawsuit claims that from 1981 to 1997, that the USDA engaged in negligent practices by evading the appeals and grievances that were given to them by black farmers and purposely denied their loans on the sole basis of their race. Now, when this case concluded, there was a ruling in their favor. They won $1 billion in 1999 from the government, and in excess, 16,000 black farmers received $50,000. Now, after news spread about this mass judgment, more black farmers appeared because they were unaware that a suit was being filed and didn't have time to apply for the judgment. John had actually lent a hand in helping these other black farmers to successfully support their cases to gain compensation for discrimination. Now, eventually, when then President Barack Obama had come into office, he signed a bill which sanctioned $1.25 billion for the late black farmers who filed their lawsuits. So, with this story, you can see how John Boyd Jr. was adamant and strong in his pursuit to ensure that not only he held on to black generational wealth, but he also wanted to make sure that black farmers Other black farmers also had a fighting chance. And this is true unity and dedication to keeping black resources within our community. Now, I do want to get on to the last segment of black wealth that also needs some improvement, which is black home ownership. Now, this area appears to be suffering the most, alongside black farmers, and for similar reasons. On an article that was actually posted by Urban, there were 5 reasons listed as to why black home ownership is decreasing. Now, the first reason states an eerie statistic where a large gap is present in white versus black homeowners. Approximately a 30% gap, and it is larger in 2020 than 1968 when discrimination was present in the housing sector. So that's why I said it's kind of eerie, because you would think that it would actually be the opposite, but it's actually worse now. And this is one of the most obvious of all reasons, because it is closely tied in with the racial wealth gap. And Susan Walker, she actually did a study on this. She's a professor of finance and real estate at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And she stated that home ownership is the main component of wealth for the most households. So this just confirms that home ownership accounts for wealth in communities. And because black people are not the majority owners when it comes to housing, this also plays a role in why the wealth gap is so large. One thing you guys have to understand is that wealth is more than just money. It's investments, savings, stocks, bonds, things that create longevity for a community that will continue generations down. Resources like land, homes, cars, these things are also taken into account when it comes to wealth. When we have an understanding of finances and economics, we will be able to possess the wherewithal to hopefully curb this wealth gap, like I stated. Now, the second point lists another statistic, but very much so necessary. The second point states that the black home ownership, if it was the same in the year 2000, then black America should have an upsurge in home ownership by 777,000. So what this article is stating is that if everything was the same and nothing has changed, black people, there should be more black homeowners by 777,000 is what this is basically stating. Now, undoubtedly, black people took the hardest hit during the Great Depression of the 1930s, even though it's rarely mentioned. But according to a study done by Coy, his research theorized that more black people should be homeowners if there was recuperation prior to year 2000. To further corroborate this, an assistant professor at the University of Washington endorsed this finding. He added it by stating that in both black and Hispanic homes, there was a proliferation in home ownership from 1989 to 2005. However, from the year 2005 to 2013, the significant decline heavily outweighed the increase, which is staggering. The article's third reason states that when it comes to those who owns homes, a black college graduate has less of a chance of getting a home versus a white high school dropout. And typically, education opens up doors and new opportunities for people to explore with a plethora of different options. But when you guys look at it statistically speaking, when we look at the research conducted by Coy using the 2017 American Community Survey, we see that white high school dropouts own homes at a rate of 60.5%, whereas with black college graduates, they own 56.4% of homes, which isn't surprising. And I say it isn't surprising for a reason, you guys, and I say this time and time again and again, that the reason we have this difficulty is because of systemic oppression. It plays a role in virtually almost every aspect of our life. The system was designed this way for a reason. It is not broke. It is working the way it was intended to, and the sooner we realize this, the sooner we will stop experiencing the shock factor. Now, this same step also talks about student loan debt as well. Black Americans have higher debts from student loans, and even when we look at repayment, Black Americans are likely to default on their loans times 5. And when we talk about the inequities that Black people face concerning the issue of student loans, it explains a large portion for why Black people are not eligible for home ownership, because there is a strict criteria for the application process, which brings us to the fourth explanation. When it comes to the routine credit qualifications, Black borrowers have a lower chance of mortgage eligibility, and In this step, the article talks about FICO credit scores. It does a good job of breaking this down. Black Americans have low FICO credit scores and a high amount of missing FICO credit scores. Let me say that again. Black Americans have low FICO credit scores and a high amount of missing FICO credit scores. This study was actually conducted by Jaya Day. She is a senior economist in the Single Family Affordable Lending and Access to Credit Division. Her research revealed a modification from rental to mortgage at 7.5% in 2018 regarding the gap for Black and white home ownership. One of the things that her study took into consideration was credit scores, and it observed FICO scores as well as missing FICO credit scores. And when you look at the comparison from Black to white, a substantial gap is present. Most white homeowners' credit scores show their FICO scores. And this article further just kind of mentions how structural racism is present in the housing economy, because when it comes to placement and socioeconomic status, African Americans adhere to a different standard, one that is not new. Through a process called redlining. It is for those who don't know what redlining is, it's a placement of Black people in impoverished areas with minimal resources and limited access to quality necessities. And this just kind of shows how Black homeowners are inexplicably subject to discriminatory practices. Now, I want to go ahead and get to the fifth and final explanation that the article lists. It states that there is a 17% gap that is undisclosed, basically stating that they are unclear as to why the gap is present. So when we look at the factors that contribute to why Black homeownership is low, with FICO scores, marital status, socioeconomic status, etc., there's still a sector that remains a mystery. Now, one thing I want to say about this reason, even though the article does not specifically state it, despite them alluding to it earlier, I think that we can surmise that the 17% could possibly be due to plain and simple racial oppression. You guys feel free to formulate your opinions down below if you think otherwise, but this article clearly states that even with all other factors taken into consideration, they still can't determine the reasoning for why this gap is present. Now that we have covered some areas along with a little history to understand why Black generational wealth is so low, I'm finally ready to offer you guys some alternatives. So I'm sorry it's kind of long, but I want to offer you some alternatives as a means to hopefully combat this theory that Black wealth will be no more in 2050. I mean, I really think that would be unfortunate if we just had nothing left at that point. So I researched the solution thoroughly, and it will tie in with the Black businesses and Black home ownership. Okay, so there are 5 Black-owned banks who specialize in mortgage lending and loans for startup businesses. These are One United Bank, Liberty Bank and Trust Company, Citizens Trust Bank, Industrial Bank, and the Harbor Bank of Maryland. Now, these banks are all FDIC insured, so your money will be safe and secure if you ever experience any kind of discrepancies or irregularities with account issues. Each of them allows you to open a personal bank account and a business bank account. Since they are Black owned, there is a higher chance that you may qualify for a loan or lending through one of these banks because they are by us for us. Now, obviously, I'm not saying just go there if you have bad credit. Obviously, you still need to work on your credit, regardless. So make sure you guys just kind of, be cognizant of that. Make sure that you have at least fair or good credit. Definitely try these alternatives because they may not turn you away quickly like other financial lending institutions. And again, just make sure you guys work on your credit. And I also want to make you guys privy to this as well. If you are working on your credit, make sure to dispute everything, even if you owe whatever is delinquent. I've actually experienced this personally where I tried to dispute something that I actually owed, but because it was actually sold to a third party for the debt, they could not collect on it because in essence what that does is it kind of forfeits their rights to be able to tell you that it's a legitimately owed debt. So just kind of, want to give you guys that little piece of information. Hopefully it kind of helps. But if that's not the case, make sure you guys can do an alternative, like set up some kind of like an affordable payment arrangement to get your credit scores in good standings, because good credit definitely gets you into some pretty high places. And stay away from credit cards. Definitely make sure you stay away from credit cards. I cannot stress with this one enough. Credit cards, depending on who the carrier is, they are known for having high interest rates and unreasonable APR or annual percentage rates. Capital One is notorious for this, so I highly advise you to stay away from them. I'll make sure to leave some links below in the description box for more information on this. Now, regarding the Black farmer and Black agriculture issue, try to go to the website for the Black Farmers National Association. You might be able to apply for a loan through this agency, or who knows, you guys may be eligible to apply for compensation if you were a farmer who was not aware of the unfair racial discrimination that took place, like I read earlier. John Boyd Jr. created this organization so that Black farmers would have a fair chance at being able to own a farm and be proud to pass down wealth to their children and so on. Now, you guys are also able to do your own independent research on this as well. If you know of any other alternatives Black people can try, definitely make sure to post them to the comment section. So with that, I am going to go ahead and get off here because I know this video is already too long, but let's try to prove these financial economist experts wrong and see if we can potentially create wealth for ourselves so that we don't exhaust it all by 2050, not 2015. Make sure you guys like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you in my next video.